Welcome to Creative Leadership. I'm your host, Jeremy Sirota. In life, most people play it safe. They know the rules of the game and they like to play by them. In fact, many labels want an artist to keep churning out what initially makes them successful. But as Miles Davis said, do not fear mistakes because there are none. My guest today takes a similar approach to leadership. He, in fact, calls mistakes experiments, and he helps the artists keep reinventing themselves, acting almost like a creativity accelerator. I'm really pleased to have Stephen Hill on the podcast today. Stephen has worked for Warp Records for over 20 years. He is currently head of North America. He has also served on the board of A2IM, the U.S. trade association representing thousands of independent record labels, and was the organization's former chairperson. I am really excited to have him on today. So, Stephen, welcome to Creative Leadership.
Thanks for having me.
You started as a digital marketing manager at Warp in 2005. And in that time, the music industry was really starting to fracture as this digital disruptive moment was coming. Streaming was still on the horizon. Social media didn't exist. And artists like Auteka were making music that defied every marketing playbook. And I'm just curious, out of that moment of working with an artist like that or other artists like that, just how did you have to react creatively to trends that almost didn't exist yet within the marketplace because things were changing so rapidly around us?
I think what's a constant, there's a lot more consistency, I think, than is immediately there. I think when you're working with an artist, I think the key is to really work with them and understand them and get to an understanding and appreciation for what they want to achieve and what they want to do. And the tools of achieving those things change over time, but actually the essence is quite similar. So when you work with like inquisitive minds, like I'm lucky to work with both in the teams that I've been part of in my time at Warp and before, but also with the artists, they're always pretty playful about what is happening in the world. They're students of what's happening. I think one of the things about being a great artist is you're really attuned to the human condition and the human emotions. So I think that there's naturally always an understanding of the landscape of any particular time and a playfulness around wanting to adapt that to be able to inform strategy. So I think it is a really interesting period that I've worked at Warp, the change of digital. I mean, I started in the UK and I remember there used to be PR teams that just did online and PR teams that just did print media and PR teams that just did TV and just did radio. And I think the inflection of all of those things is a real trend, and the fact that everything has become so much more digital first in that period of time and way more social and way more peer-to-peer and less kind of top down. But fundamentally, it's about trying to understand what an artist wants to achieve, where they see themselves going, and helping navigate the landscape of the time in a way that supports those goals, really.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to something you said in a really great setup for my next question for you, which is you've said that successful promotion campaigns always start with a good understanding of what the artist does. And this has been part of the Warp ethos from day one. But here's the question for you. You have these boundary breaking artists like Aphex Twin or One Otrix, Point Never, and sometimes even they don't know what they're doing or what they want until they've actually done it. And so there's almost this question of like, how do you market the unmarketable? How do you approach this in a way that no one quite knows what the endpoint is? Or are you really leading through what you just said? Like you're leading through who that artist is, and you're kind of almost discovering what the endpoint, because everyone always starts with here's the goal. And then how do we build a program towards it? Are you starting the opposite way, which is here's the artist and let's explore what we're going to find next?
Yeah, I mean, well, it varies because everyone's different, obviously, and that, you know, goes for me, you. Everyone has different ways of being motivated and being able to engage creatively into a project. So it does differ between artists. Like some artists will come with a really, you know, defined direction, but maybe it won't be fully fleshed out, but it will be a very defined direction. And we know that that's all we're going to get. Like we're only going to get that sentence, and that will almost come with the record. And then, but you know that that particular artist will give you rope to run with that idea.
Mm.
And they might, you know, they'll say yes and no to certain things, but in overall, you know that you've got that dynamic that they'll give you a seed and they kind of trust you to go and run with it. I think other artists you want to work with a bit closer to develop what that seed is. They might not know what that is right ahead of ahead of the game, but you know it's there. You've just got to help, and the team have to help kind of tease it out of them, and then allow us to run. You know, other artists are really engaged with the promotion of a project. So, you know, I've had situations where I've gone to an artist and said, I need, like, we think we need this like gap. We've got this gap of a week, or we need something that's going to communicate this kind of thing.
Mm.
And they'll go away and come back with something like that you would beyond your wildest dreams, you know, for that achieve that. So I think I mean, it's just so much about relationships and being able to have that conversation, knowing it's that artist is going to want to, you know, chat things through with you for half an hour. And then you might hear something they say almost flippantly that then becomes the kind of North Star of a project. Or, you know, it comes from a team member that's had a great conversation with that artist after a show. You know, they've been hanging out to 3 a.m. and they've got that like little seed of an idea that then just sparks a lot of other people. So I think as much as anything, it's about relationship, being able to have the conversation, knowing what the artist wants to, and you knowing how the artist is most comfortable sharing those kind of things, and then running with it.
Well, I love two things you said, and I want to dig into one of them, which is that sort of just sitting down with the artist, and I like to call that meandering the fields. You know, it's always that last idea that no one thought that was going to become where you start exploring and find something really interesting. And I love that approach. I'm also curious about the approach. I bet you people who are listening will be curious. I suspect a lot of people have no idea what happens in a quote unquote marketing meeting. So let's pretend an artist just gives you like a one sentence, you know, clouds, future, dystopia, you know, whatever it might be. And you're like, oh gosh, how do we interpret this? We know the artist, we work with them for a while. What actually happens? Like, are there people in the room? Does someone start Googling? Like, do you sit down in a room, just start throwing ideas at each other? Like, how does that process actually unfold? Like, what would be a common way?
Yeah, well, the most common way is we have really amazing campaign managers at Warp, and they essentially quarterback the marketing campaign on any release. And they'll work really closely with the A&R who are responsible for getting the music delivered, and working with the artists on the art side, like making the music great, the artwork great, the videos great, those kinds of things, working with really landmark co-creators in design and video and film and interactive and all the other areas that we might collaborate with. They'll bring a project to a marketing team that's full of, you know, specialists in PR, specialists in the regions, specialists in digital, etc., sales, talk through the background, and then we'll have a conversation about, you know, who we think can be excited about that artist, how we can be excited about the music, and thinking about strategies to reach them. You know, I always find, and it's something one of the founders of Warp taught me really early in my Warp career, and I still use it in terms of building projects, is the where are we now? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? I think that's such a great structure for creative meetings. And it's a great way, you know, I think in really successful meetings, when I see people run them, I think they're really great when they get everyone in a meeting up to speed as quickly as possible with the detail they need and the background they need. then to have a great conversation. I think that's the where are we now section. Like the A&R, no one understands the artist like the A&R and campaign manager. No one's having those kind of conversations. As much as, I mean, hopefully everyone in the team has conversations, but again, it will vary by artist. Hopefully they can get everyone up to the level of understanding as quickly as they can, but with the requisite detail to spark ideas. And then the how do we get there is way more kind of blue sky, I guess. Like, where do we want to go? Where do we imagine this artist being in 3 years' time? And then the how do we get there is being really specific about tactics, what's next steps, action points, etc., etc. And everyone, and the reason I like that structure is people can make it their own a little bit. I think that, we've got really great people, and I think effective tools are ones that they can shape in a way that it gives them a little bit of a structural guideline, but they don't have to do it like everyone else does it, because you can't really do things that way. So yeah, broadly, that will be the way that we do it. But again, there's no ultimate truth, really. It's trying to respond to the situation.
Yeah. Do you ever have to, here's something, a trick I like to do within my own company, which is, wave the magic wand exercise, where you take away all of the resource constraints, all of the politics, all the challenges, and you say, if we could wave our magic wand, what would we do? And you're smiling because you say, you already understand what you're going to get a completely different response than what you would normally get. Because most minds go to is like, oh, this is how we do things always. But I can imagine that with the type of artists, and I won't keep using avant-garde, but like experimental artists who also have found a lot of commercial success as well. Do you have to use that sort of technique or card to try to delve into the psyche of the artists you work with? Or is there another way? Because some of the marketing campaigns you've done are really quite unique, and they don't come about by just going through a standard process of this is how you market an artist.
I think it's important to do with all creative industries, really. If you're working with I worked in film before music, and if you're working in film, it's the same. You're dealing with creative people, and I think we're dealing with people that think about things in a really, deep way. You don't want to, there's practicalities that come with every project, but you don't want to lead with the practicalities.
Yeah.
It's better to lead with, in my experience, I think seeing other people when things feel really good and positive, they're led by the more kind of qualitative elements, really, and what they would like to see happen. I think it's important. I think there needs to be like a level of realism to that. So you don't want to get hopes up that aren't achievable. But yeah, I think again, it just comes down to a relationship. The relationships are everything, really, with the people around you, and hopefully you have trusted. You strive to have trusted long-term relationships with people that you can have honest conversations and be excited about a project.
Yeah. So how does that, I'm curious then, because you talk about sort of, you have a lot of longstanding relationships, like artists come to Warp, stay with Warp. But at some point, there's always a new artist. There's an artist you haven't worked with before. You're working on their first project. How does your thinking have to evolve or change when you're working with someone where you don't have that same, you think about a friend who you haven't seen in a decade, but you went to high school with. You just immediately jump right back in. It's like it's like you're just continuing the conversation as if there was no time gap. But with a new artist, you're trying to establish trust and understanding. So do you have to approach it differently? And how do you go about doing that? Just because you want to get there quickly as well. You want to move things along. At the same time, you can't at the same pace with, say, a 20-year veteran of the Warp system.
Yeah. Well, it's I think it's two-pronged, right? You rely on the people that you work with. So for one side, I would rely on say it's a new signing that one a particular A&R is like driven, but we as an A&R team, we've decided we want to work with, and the contracting is done, the agreement's done, they're coming into the project, and normally we'll have, some kind of interaction, with that artist before signing or with that management team. It will tend to be, relatively short, in comparison to when you're actually working with them. So we trust our A&R team to like share the information, background, like any things that are useful for us to have as a sort of launch pad that can give us, the best opportunity to develop our own relationships with that particular artist. There's a certain healthiness, like which approaching every project kind of with fresh eyes and a fresh mind. Like there's a lot of things, an artist changes over time and might want to achieve a different thing. We're lucky to work with such incredible, restless, creative minds and capabilities. It's rare that it kind of stays the same from a project to project basis. So I think it's always good to go in with a bit of an open mind, even when you do have that new relationship. And then when you're, I think it's a thing for all of us is, as we develop our careers, as we move into new positions, our relationship with that artist might change over time. When I first worked with Autek, now I essentially work with them, probably their main point of contact at Warp. But when I started, I was just building their websites, and my relationship with them has changed over time. And every time it's different. And you're always needing to, I think, go into those relationships fresh. But then certainly when we have a new artist, there's not that kind of learned experience of working with that person. It's just like any relationship. You just get to know people, try to listen, try and be communicative and supportive and give them the time that they need and they deserve. And it's a combination of all those things, but it's like building any relationship, really.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of things, which is just active listening, which is always, we're so focused on what we're going to say next that we forget to actually sit there and not just like hear, but to process it. And that challenges all of us, especially as things get busy. You also say something I love, which is curiosity. You didn't use that word, but really what you're talking about is you just have a curiosity. Like, what is this artist about? What do they want to achieve? And then another one that a different guest used, which is you kind of were alluding to it also, childlike wonderment. Like that's how you keep things fresh. You're just like, you're wondering about the world. The world is so fascinating. It keeps changing. And sometimes as we go older, we lose that. And it's actually more important to grab onto it as we get older so that we can continue to stay fresh and have an open mind as things evolve. But I'm actually going to, just because I'm looking at the little chat here and seeing a comment, let's do a real-time question from someone listening, which is, these are things this is about demystifying, which is there's no book you can read to get this. It's like, how long does a marketing meeting last? Who is in those meetings? Do you work with external agencies or you do it all in-house? I mean, these are all things that just can't find online as answers.
Right.
So I'd love to hear myself as well, how you do it at work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, there's challenges every day, and you don't get it right every day. I don't get it right every day. There's challenges. And when there's time challenges or competing, sometimes two people have a completely different understanding of what something should be or do. So there's always difficult, navigable situations that come up at any time, really. And that's sort of relevant to the meeting question, because I don't think we always get meetings right. But I think when I personally feel when meetings are really effective is they're not too big, they're a decent size.
What's decent? Just to ask, what decent mean to you? Like 4 to 8? Or
I think 8 is
8.
good. Yeah. I mean, there will be times that we have more than that though. It depends, right? I think if you're having a meeting to get interaction and dialogue and you're trying to solve a problem in a meeting, you want to keep that meeting to like 8 people, tops. But if you're trying to present to a team, give them background, like the A&R background that I mentioned before, or like I think that can be bigger because you might just be getting a few comments about the music, and it's great that people are involved, and you can sort of tell who really loves an album and the broader team when you have that. And so that's really cool, and I think that's really, really great. I think it's difficult in a huge meeting to answer problems, but if it's about stimulating a team to go and think about stuff, like I think it can be bigger.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if we're trying to make something, have answer things and like um shoot the shit on stuff and like do that, then I think making it quite small, having a range of viewpoints that are representative of various areas of the project. Working with different managers on different projects is a great resource of seeing how different people do it. I mean, I think it was so informative to me being based in London and running and working with the North America team so closely to run projects for like, Grizzly Bear and Flying Lotus and these kind of battles, these American artists, and having relationships with their management, having relationships with these artists just taught me so much about the cultural difference and all of those kinds of things. So I think it's really healthy to work with external people to bring new ideas in the same way that Brian Eno has collaborated throughout his artistic career to just keep things fresh and keep new stimulus and keep learning new things really. And then it's great to work with a team that are in-house. They're really passionate about a project. They're so close. They're like really focused on that artist. They're building that relationship with that artist over a period of years. So there's real benefits to both. But I think we're lucky because we've got a really good group of people in-house and we work with really, really great people out of house. And it feels pretty symbiotic generally.
I mean, two things. One is the agencies and the networks you have of third parties is part of the value that you bring as Warp, right? You have your teams and everything you do internally and the passion and your understanding of the artist, but like this whole network is part of that value proposition. You've built this up over decades. I also love the idea of not always, but on different projects, whether that's at a label or otherwise, working with third-party agencies or vendors or consultants, because they help to sometimes validate or disprove what you're working on very quickly. Internally, we can all convince ourselves of how brilliant we are. And sometimes you just present it like, I love to bring things at stages iteratively to people to just gut check me. Like, am I just in the bubble and I'm just missing the big picture? Or is this actually really good? And that's where I've always found third parties to be really helpful because sometimes internally we all work ourselves up. And you also sometimes have this group dynamic where it's like you start going so far down the path that no one wants to just like raise their hand and be like, hey, I'm sorry. Can someone just explain why are we even doing this? This doesn't make any sense to me. It's actually really powerful to have that sort of flag in a company, to have the person like the truth sayer who come out and say the things that no one else wants to say. But that helps when you have that third party to do it as well.
Right, for sure.
All right. I'm going to throw you a really fun curveball. We're going to see how this one goes. You tell me.
I'm ready.
I was going through some of this way tech companies interview. And there's this great one about a Google interview question. How would you explain the internet to someone from the 1800s? That is not a question for you, just to be clear. But I wanted to take one of your artists, and we could pick a different one. It doesn't have to be this one. It could be any of your artists. But actually, I'll let you pick. If you were to launch an artist today that you've been working with for 20, 30 years, no existing reputation, right? But it's an artist you work with for 20, 30 years. How would you build the anticipation for the artist with an artist who doesn't like to do traditional marketing? So let's say it was like Aphex Twin is one that comes to mind, who I know you've worked with for a long time. You're launching them today. How would you do this today? They have no name out there. They're putting out their first album, their first release, and they don't want to do anything traditionally. How is this differently?
Well, how do I answer that? Well, I think in some ways, the way music, now there's kind of flaws to this logic, which I'll probably come around to. But I think one of the elements around music today, we had a bit of a weird period in the middle of the first like decade of my career in music, I guess, where it was quite top down, and it was quite quick. You could say if you were a respected label or you had big marketing budgets or like a major label style, big marketing budgets and a radio team, or you're a really respected independent label with an audience and a following, it was pretty quick to kind of seed a new artist into that audience, whether they will help to the level that they would fall in love with that artist is down to many, many factors. But essentially you could find an audience for an artist pretty quickly. But I think when you look at the history of music outside of that like weird kind of 10-year odd period, maybe slightly longer, it's actually been way slower gestation than that. And it's been about word of mouth, hearing great music, being able to identify with an artist, being able to share your own, especially when you're younger, share a part of your identity with a particular artist or musician, whether it's like clothes or whether it's like spirit or whatever it happens to be. Those things have been a bit slower, and artists need to tour and play in front of people and get in front of people over and over again. I mean, you look at those, 60s, 70s artists, their touring schedules were crazy. They play like 250 shows a year. And I'm talking people like Elton John, where it's like they would play that many shows and they'd release an album every year. And it would be like, hammer it, be in front of people, be in front of people, be in front of people, consistency. And I think sort of now we're kind of back to that kind of energy. Obviously, it's way more digital, where people are interfacing with this music is way more global. It's way more digital. It's obviously on this crazy scale. And like, I think the caveat to what I was saying that I referenced earlier is just the volume now. The volume of things is sort of unprecedented, really. I think for a new artist, you've got to put music out. You've got to work on like how you're communicating what you do, be uncompromising in what you do, but just be active and keep going. And that's where hopefully a label can help support keeping that activity going. A team around an artist can help by keeping that activity going, both through your own activity, but also working with third parties, media, etc., internet personalities. But I don't think there's a quick to put music out like an Aphex Twin. It's really challenging now. It's really challenging for young artists. I feel for young artists because there's just so much, and they're competing with the history of music as well. The barriers to entry are just so small now. There's great things there because it's meant that artists that would not have been supported by media, either through their cultural background or their originating country, look at African music or Latin music, these weren't platformed, and the internet has given platforms to this. And now it's pop music. It's as big as anything. It's experimental. It's everything. It's experimental music. It's pop music. It's everything. So there's huge benefits and positives to that changing. I think getting an audience, capturing an audience, sustaining that audience is a challenge. Maintaining an audience over time. But at the end of the day, fans are really sophisticated. They know what's up, and you've got to meet them where they are and be you, really. And none of that is a particularly right. Okay, well, I can go and tell all my artists to do that. It's like not that simple, but it's not simple, really. You've got to release great music. I mean, someone like Aphex Twin, I mean, he's going to go down in history, music history, as one of the finest musicians that ever made music. He's going to go down like a Beethoven goes down, and I don't mean to be flippant, but I truly believe that in 200 years, people will talk about Aphex Twin, and that doesn't come around every day. But, I just think you've got to be true, but, hopefully work with a team around you that can help you navigate how to get visibility to your work. And some of the best decisions I've seen both from teammates and from artists is when to say no. This is not right for me. This is not an association that works. And that can be a really important answer for people that's maybe not acknowledged often.
No, there's the truth sayer again, the person who says what needs to be said, even if it's uncomfortable. I also love, I'm going to tell you, there's two things that I never did in my history in the music industry, which was A&R or marketing. But I have a marketing idea for you. So you use this word uncompromising, which resonates with me with like that could be your tagline for work, in fact. You have this ability now to spin up all these AI agents really quickly. They should I call them apps, just whatever. We'll call them AI agents. Sounds more clear. I have this idea where Aphex Twin would release an app or an AI agent, allow anyone to remix his newest release. And they could play around with the stems and they can make it this and that and the other thing. And then when they go to output it, the output's exactly what the original song was.
The ultimate troll. I think it's sick the way that the future music making tools for people. I know that the proportion of time that people are spending with music, especially with younger demographics, is increasingly towards music making and interactive things. And it's really cool, like the way that it's democratizing music making. It's just how you look at it. It's a really fun thing for people and a fun thing for people to enjoy. Hopefully we can, I think that there needs to be a space, obviously, for people that are laboring over that synth sound for 6 months before it's quite right. And I think that that's really important too. But the future of music is really, really exciting. And, it allows for a lot of those kind of playful ideas that means fans of an artist can actually be part of that. And I think that is one of the things I sort of skirted around. But, you got to build a fan base. You got to really try and build a fan base, build mailing lists, and some of these things, they cannot be buzzy terms. That's definitely something that I've seen in my 20 years of working in music, that you have been buzzy, like 18-month periods. I remember when it was box sets, it's like, why make a box set? Like, that's the feel, like, it's kind of really a box set, but you make a box set if the work justifies a box set, fantastic, and it makes a great product that people want, brilliant, but not just throw a box set out for the sake of throwing it out. Sometimes these things are really valid, even though they're not a buzzy term anymore. And things like mailing lists, like ways that you're owning your own data, owning your own audience, is really, really important right from the start. And communicate with those people, communicate with your fans, and build a relationship with your fans.
I'm glad you brought that up. Traditional marketing says you need these 7 touch points to get someone to, quote, convert, however you want to define what conversion means, whether it's to stream an album, to go to a show, you name it. But as an outsider, at least, and tell me if I'm mistaken, but sometimes artists will just completely disappear for years at a time and then come back with almost minimal promotion. And so how do you work with some of your artists who take that approach? Because there's such a kind of shedding of identity, shedding of sort of what resonates with your identity. I mean, music and identity have always gone so hand in hand, and people are cycling through that so quick. So what is it? Is there something unique about the artists that you work with that just resonate over time? Is there a way that you try to manage that connectivity between these distances?
Yeah.
What do you do about that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it can be challenging. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes, we're an artist first label, so we're not going to do something if an artist doesn't want to do. We might make a case for it and try and make that case as well as we can. But at the end of the day, we'll follow what the artist wants to do. And that's because we believe they understand their career and they understand their path better than anyone else. Sometimes it can be challenging, coming away from a project without and not having anything for a few years, or maybe there'll be an expectation there'll be something, but the art doesn't quite work out. But I think we're pretty, that's that's what it is. That's what the art calls for. That's what we're here to do. We're here to support them in their journey and try and make things sustainable for them.
It's the classic, sometimes you just have to steer into a skid. And I was giving some advice to someone on the team today, and I said, hey, you need to stop getting mad that a rock's a rock. Like, it's going to be a rock. It's always going to be a rock. Maybe over thousands and tens of thousands of years, it'll turn to sand, but right now it's a rock. So accept that. And now, how are you going to react differently? As opposed to, I wish they would have done this, or I wish someone would have responded this way, because that's where you get frustrated, as opposed to building around a program, because that's, you can put all the best information to someone, as you were saying, give them the options, explain the opportunities and the reasons to do it. But I love, at the end of the day, this has always been your ethos, is like, let the artist make the decision, and we're just here to support around that.
We're here to guide it. But also, it's like one of my favorite David Lynch quotes: "You got to go away to come back." Sometimes it's good, to be quiet for a bit and then make it special when you reintroduce yourself. So, I think there's lots of ways to do it, but I like what you say. Sometimes situations are where they are. So it's just, it's what the art calls for. It's what
How do you respond to it? That's the difference.
Right. I think that's it. I think you want to be foot forward, you don't want to be passive, but you also want to be flexible and kind of fast on your feet and kind of have fun with it. It's like any great art, any great creativity is kind of made great through restriction a lot of the time. And I think that's true of marketing campaigns. I think that's true of the work itself. When people have everything, it can be bloated or, a bit too much. And sometimes, scarcity breeds creativity. I think it really is about, trying to be as planned as you can, but then being flexible and storytelling with what you've got, really.
Yeah. I'm going to take a little bit of a hard pivot for the next couple questions in like 90-degree angles. I've been really excited to ask you this one. It either could be a great question or a terrible one, which I know I shouldn't caveat questions, but I just did. In a parallel universe, Warp only signs artists who makes music for animals. What would be your first signing and why?
What animal would be my first signing?
Interpret it as you will.
Well, God, what a question. I mean, I'd personally like rhythmic things. So a cicada or something. You could sample a cicada. That would be pretty sick, pretty meditative. So yeah, let's go with that.
And who are you marketing this to? So you have cicada,
millions of them.
The great cicada gathering of 2026. I can't wait for this.
I mean, watch out for your crops.
Biggest live event in animal history.
Why go small? There's no point going for blue whales. There's only so much. That's a user-centric super fan model for sure. If you go for blue whales.
Yes, you're going for the largest total addressable market. I like this. Big TAM. That's the name of the band, Big TAM.
Perfect.
Done. Okay, let's do this. All right, I want to do some practical advice because I know there's a lot of young professionals we've been talking about. You're mentoring someone. They're going to take on a sort of creative role at an independent label today. Is there a counterintuitive or practical, it could be either a piece of advice you give them about how they need to operate in today's environment, particularly with some of the things you've talked about, which is trying to balance artistic vision versus also commercial realities about how the marketplace operates?
It's a really great question because, and I realize I'm banging on, but I think it's hard for young people coming into the industry because I think we're such an inflection time that they probably understand things better than a lot of their bosses. And like the way that, because things are changing so significantly so I can imagine that it's quite challenging sometimes for young people entering the music industry that they see the way that people interact with music and, on the ground. I would say try and utilize those insights and communicate those insights, but also be humble that there's things that you might not have full understanding of or full knowledge of, and utilize the people around you, ask questions. I mean, again, it's like building relationships. Ask a lot of questions, and hopefully you're working with people that, have your best interests at heart and want you to succeed and want you to develop in your position. I think it's great to look for those kind of opportunities where you think you're going to get support and people have your best interests at heart. Even if they don't get it right every day, you feel like there's that like underlying support there.
I always hate to have to wind these down, but we have come to that time. Stephen, thanks so much for coming on. I was really psyched to have you on. It's super interesting to hear about how you work with your artists, the advice for young professionals. And I like to end each of my interviews with one of my favorite questions, which is describe yourself in 6 words.
Yeah, I struggle with this because I wasn't sure about whether it should be just me, or but I feel like what I like to do, I mean, support sustainable artists, transatlantic and intersectional storytelling. We'll go with that.
I love the way you took that. That was super interesting. It makes complete sense after having just spoken with you. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being here today. And please be sure to go check out Warp Records at warp.net and go discover some incredible artists. And I will see you next time on Creative Leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.